if someone put a gun to my head and said to me, what is your favorite role-playing game? You have to pick. This is that game. This is the Burning Wheel. So what I want to do today is talk to you about why I like the Burning Wheel, why I think it's a good game design from a player perspective, a good game design from the perspective of a designer, right? I'm going to give you some design insight into why this is a good game. So what is the Burning Wheel? Straight from the back of the game, this is Luke Crane's ad copy from the back of the game. Burning Wheel is an award-winning fantasy role-playing game in which players take on the roles of vibrant, dynamic characters whose very beliefs propel the story forward. So the stuff that matters to me here is dynamic characters and beliefs propel the story, right? Like, that's the stuff that matters to me, and that's why I emphasize it here. Those two things are what make this game so good. This is about dynamic characters, right? Luke tells us the game is about dynamic characters. Characters change in Burning Wheel. They begin one way, and as we see them move through play, they become something different. And this isn't about like, they're becoming different over time, right? A month has passed, 6 months has passed, a year has passed, whatever. This is about active stuff happening in play that modifies the characters, right? Every moment at the table is about changing these characters. So, like, Dr. Grigori, okay, sure, Dr. Grigori in Westmarch is my character there. He's a cleric, and we know he's some weird stuff and whatever, but really, nothing about the mechanics tell me how Dr. Grigori changes, except that he gets more powerful as he levels up, right? We know my attack bonus, we know my hit points, all of that stuff, but we don't have character change in a real meaningful way. My character's not dynamic except in a very specific environment. So Burning Wheel is about character change. It's also about characters whose beliefs move the story forward. And it's not just, my character believes this thing, so I'm going to role play that way. And role-playing doesn't have mechanisms. It's about beliefs being mechanically propellant in the fiction of the game. So your character believes things. You believe that the king is a bad person who needs to be taken down a notch. You believe that dragons are a plague upon this land and need to be killed. You believe that, God damn it, you're the rightful king and your stupid brothers never deserve to be king in the first place, and you will do anything you can to seize that throne. Right? These are the things that the characters believe. And Burning Wheel mechanizes those beliefs and uses them to drive play. It's not just bullshit your character thinks about. It's not just background stuff. It's not like, Dr. Grigori has these ideas, but the game doesn't give a shit about what Dr. Grigori wants. Right? It's about real moment-to-moment stuff that says, okay, these are characters who believe in things, and what do they do to pursue those beliefs, right? What do we see them do to get that point across, to move towards those beliefs? And that's what we call play, basically. What's Burning Wheel about? It's about characters driven by their traits, their instincts, and their belief, and who act on those, right? It's not about characters who are driven by their strength stat. It's not about characters who are driven by the same motivation, right? We're not all trying to do the same thing. And we're driven by those beliefs, those traits, those instincts, and we act on them. We do active shit to get things done based on those things about our character. Now, how is the game about that, right? How is it about believing stuff? How is it about having instincts? How is it about your character's traits? Well, it's about those by making character motivation the core element of gameplay. Why do you fight for the things you fight for? What beliefs are you burning for? Right? Everything else in the game, and we'll come to look at that, everything else in the game supports that structure, right? So as I move through talking about the rules and about the game itself, think about this. These rules are all designed to portray characters who are driven by traits, instincts, and beliefs, right? That's what it's about. It's about character-driven roleplay. And how do we reward people for that behavior? They're rewarded for acting along with or in opposition to, when being dramatic, their core elements. Everything comes from their bits, from the beliefs, instincts, and traits. So by playing your belief, by playing your instinct, by playing your trait, by changing your belief dramatically, by ignoring your instinct when it wouldn't be right to do it, when your traits get you in trouble, all of those things reward you mechanically. You're given fuel. Let's talk, what is this game about? Because I've been at enough trade shows and booths and conventions and worked enough to know that the first fucking thing that every person on earth asks when they come up to a role-playing game table and they start perusing the games, they pick up a game and they're like, oh, this is interesting. The first thing they ask is, hey, what kind of system does this use? Is this a D20 kind of game? Is this a dice pool? Do you use D10s in this game? Which I think is a bullshit question to ask, but hey, that's where we start. So the core system in Burning Wheel is you get a shit ton of D6s. Well, I mean, maybe not a shit ton. Maybe you're terrible. Maybe you only get 2 or 3. But you get a bunch of D6s, according to your skills or attributes, whatever you're rolling. You roll them against a target that the GM is going to tell you. We call this the obstacle, or the ob. And if you get enough successes, you get what you want, right? Easy. So, I've got swords 4. I want to kill you. I'm going to pick up my sword. I'm going to stick it in you. I'm going to roll 4 dice for my sword. And if I get enough successes, you're going to be dead, right? Easy, simple, standard RPG stuff. D6 dice pool is the answer to that asinine question that people ask. But let's go into a little more detail. Intent and task. So, intent and task is a philosophical underpinning for the Burning Wheel that helps the players decide what happens when the dice finish rolling on the table, right? So before you roll a die, or number of dice, in Burning Wheel, you answer these questions to the group. You say, what are you trying to accomplish? And how do you intend to accomplish that? And sometimes it's easy, right? Kill man with sword. Use sword skill, roll. If you roll enough, you kill man. Yay, man dead, sword good. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's using your sword skill to do something else. Sometimes it's saying, my intent is to impress the king. And the GM says, well, how are you going to do that? And you say, by killing men with sword. So the GM says, fine. Roll your sword skill. If you roll high enough, you kill the man, because that's part of your task, but your intent comes true. You impress the king, right? And so this is where it's important when you're looking at what is my intent, how do I intend to do it, and even more importantly, when I succeed, what do I get? It's clear in Burning Wheel what you get when you succeed at your roll. So let's look at this. So in Burning Wheel, the GM determines the difficulty you're rolling against. They build up the obstacle. And this is generally based on the skill you're using, how difficult it is, right? It's easier to make a shoe for a horse than it is to make an entire suit of plate mail. So higher obstacle on that blacksmithing test, or that smithing test, right? So the GM does that. That's the GM's job. Now, your job is to determine how many dice you have in the skill or attribute or stat that you're rolling, and determining modification. So you can bandy about for additional dice by way of circumstances. So you can say, I want to build a suit of armor. Now, I would like to build the best suit of armor possible. So because I went on this last quest and I got this magic hammer from the dwarves, I think I deserve an extra die because of fictionally positioning myself to win. Right? So now I have this extra die that I can use. Now, you can also modify the number of dice by if you're wounded. The more wounded you are, the less dice you get. If you have particular traits, so I might have armor smith, right? So that might be a trait that can help me when I make armor. I might have a fork that I can apply. Hey, Adam, what's a fork? You can see I use the weird capitals to help indicate. So a fork is what's called a field of related knowledge. So, for example, if I'm killing someone with a sword, I might also get to fork in dice from knife, brawling, streetwise. I might have knightwise if I'm fighting a knight. And each skill that you have, you can fork. You can use as a field of related knowledge. You can fork in to your skill. So, what's cool here is that you're jockeying for specific additional dice. And someone pointed out the last time I was talking about Burning Wheel that this would be a great system for someone who, like Jeff, for example, Mr. Scarian and Swansong, who really likes to ask for more than the current fiction presents. Like, wait a minute, well, didn't you already say that I had fought these guys before? Or don't I already know how to penetrate this kind of armor? In Swan Song, I just have to guess at a number. But if we were playing Burning Wheel, I could give him a die for every skill he had that was appropriate. It's fantastic and a really good parallel. So, forks. You can also have your friends fork for you. So, if, for example, I'm in a sword fight, and it's me and a guard, and I have my friend here, my friend wants to help me, and they have sword, they can help me with their sword die. And at the table, in the real world, you physically pick up one of your dice, you got a handful of blue dice from your pool, I will pick up one of my red dice and I will give it to you and say, here you go. I am helping, right? If you succeed on your roll, you get what you want, as established by the intent. The GM can't screw you. The GM can't be like, well, you succeeded, you killed the guy, but the king's not really impressed. Because we established that part of my intent was that I impressed the king, and I fucking succeeded, GM, so you can't take that away from me. I get my intent, because I succeeded at your obstacle. Failure, however, means you don't get your intended result, but you don't always get it in the same way. So in that case, had I failed, the GM could say, okay, yes, you kill your enemy, but the king is like, meh, not really paying attention. He was looking at his mug at the time, and, well, you'll have to try a different tactic, right? The king doesn't give a shit. The important thing here is you fail forward. The GM includes more complications every time you fail, so that when you roll, nothing happens, never happens. Right? You'll never, ever have the GM say, you fail, nothing. What do you want to do now? And part of the reason for that is let it ride. Now, let it ride means you only ever roll once for anything. Ever. Like, I want to sneak into the wizard's castle. I'm a mile away from the wizard's castle. If we're playing D&D, the GM can say, okay, fine. You sneak up to the castle wall, roll stealth. Okay, cool. Now you try to get past the guards, roll stealth. Okay, now you want to get in the window, roll stealth. Oh, you want to get upstairs, roll stealth. Oh, you want to sneak up behind the wizard, roll stealth. In Burning Wheel, it's one roll, that's it. You don't get extra chances, you don't get to go back and do it again. It's you establish your intent. I intend to sneak in to get to the wizard's lair with the wizard. I want him to have his back turned to me. Now, sneaking unnoticed to the wall, way lower obstacle. Sneaking all the way up to the wizard, way higher obstacle. So you can break it down into individual sections if you want to. That's your choice, by establishing smaller intents. If something changes, it becomes a different roll. So, I want to sneak into the wizard's castle, and it's the middle of the night, and I fucked it up, and I got caught, and the wizard had me arrested, and you know what? Let's try that again. But wait, I have to change something, because it doesn't work at night. I can't do it. I failed. But wait, the wizard's guards are orcs, and they are blinded by sunlight. Let's do it at noon. Let's sneak in at noon. That's a different circumstance. That's a different attempt. So Let It Ride allows you to skip over all that bullshit as a player, and also protects you from the GM being like, roll again, roll again, roll again, roll again. Oh no, you failed. Haha, cool, big boss fight. So let's talk about characters. What is a character in Burning Wheel? So if you tuned in to the stream that I did about Roll20's new Burning Wheel character sheet, some of this will seem familiar to you, some of it might not. I'm going to get we're going to be a little more holistic about it. We're not going to talk about the character sheet so much as what makes up a character. So what we're looking at right now, this is your character burning worksheet. Yes, characters are a big deal in this game. So that means you need paperwork to be able to make the character. It seems intense, I know. Deep breath in, deep breath out. Let's all chill for a minute. This is to help you design your character. And the first thing you do when you're designing a character is choose their life paths. Because as I mentioned before in that stream, a character is not just what we see on screen. A character is made up, just like every other person who's ever existed, of the moments that make up their life leading to when we see them on screen, right? Like Omar in The Wire. Omar didn't just spring into existence. Omar grew from childhood. Omar was born somewhere, Omar did things, and eventually he became the badass gangster that we see on screen. So the same thing is true for Burning Wheel. So let's take a look at a life path. Life paths are about this idea that you have context for your character. They give you the skills you're going to choose from mechanically, and they build space for you to use their circles and relationships later. The game uses 4 of them. You can do more or less. If you want to be grizzled veterans, you might do 5 or 6. If you want to be young teenage characters, you might do 2 or 3. You have that option. The GM will work with you to do that. So this is what a life path looks like. If you take Bishop as one of your life paths, this is what you get. The Bishop life path takes 8 years. It gives you 45 resource points. You can lead from being a bishop into a city life path, an outcast life path, or the noble court. When you take Bishop as a life path, you are given access to, but you don't immediately get them, the religious history skill, the intimidation skill, ritual, symbology, history, and obscure history. You get 7 points to spend. You get 2 points, and you have to take domineering presence. As a bishop, you also have to take religious history. The first item on any list is a thing you don't have a choice. You have to take those. To be allowed to become a bishop, you have to first be an archpriest, a baron, a viscount, a count, a duke, or a prince, and have the Your Grace trait. So bishop's a big deal. If you're playing 2 life paths, you're not going to be allowed to be a bishop. It takes you 8 years to process being a bishop, and then you can move on to your next thing. And you'll have a full skill list made up of whatever it was that you did. Knights are going to have different ones. Pages, bandits, kings, whatever. Everyone's going to have different skill lists, different traits, and some different requirements. So you have those. That'll help you build your skill list. It'll help you build your trait list. And then you can go on and spend points to make your character. So let's take a look at the character sheet. This is the character sheet. This is the smaller version. I've covered some stuff up because you don't have to worry about it. We're not going to go through it in detail. But you'll notice how the front page of the character sheet puts beliefs, instincts, traits, and relationships right there in the front. That's the immediate first place you look. Because when you're playing Burning Wheel, you want to know at any given moment, what does my character believe? What do I do instinctively? And what are my traits that I have to accomplish that? So how do I get through life? And so, when you're playing D&D or you're playing in really any role-playing game, sometimes there are those situations where you start to wonder, like, okay, I don't really know what my character would do. And maybe you look at your alignment and you're like, well, I'm chaotic evil. Maybe I would chaotic evil something here. Yeah, that sounds good. It's not specific, and so beliefs and instincts help you as a player just take off from there. You're like, okay, the king is a horrible person. I need to unseat them. What do I do right now to unseat the king? Well, let's go after his allies. Let's go kidnap the prince, right? It makes you have an option. It gives you a thing to do. Beliefs are a statement paired with an actionable thing, something you can do. So this is an example of a belief, right? My uncle, the king, is a pretender to the crown. I will enlist the aid of the Baron of Plotlandia to unseat him. So right this moment, if I'm not doing that, if I'm not trying to get the aid of the Baron of Plotlandia, I'm not pursuing this belief. But thankfully, I have 3 of them. So I can pursue other beliefs in the same way. So, for example, I might also have a belief that says, the high priest of this kingdom is under the spell of a sorceress, and I will free him. And that might tie into this belief, but it might be unrelated. But what matters is they're tied directly to the situation of play. So if my GM says, all right, you're all members of the same noble family who've been called down by your father's friend, the king, the new king, called down to the capital to help the king get control. The king is having a hard time. And so one of the characters might be the dad in the family, the steadfast father of the family. One might be the tomboy young girl in the family. One might play the bastard son. And so you all have these beliefs, but they're about the situation. They're tied directly to that situation, and they're designed to drive you towards specific action and conflict in play. So you get 3 of these. They change on the regular. They're just something your character believes, something you're going to do about that. Your instincts are things that your character does without thinking about them. The classic example is, whenever I'm startled, I draw a weapon. Now, the idea is that these are if-then statements, never statements, always statements. you can just have an instinct, whenever I get up in the morning, put on my goddamn armor, right? And then you are never, ever out of your armor when it matters. Unless the GM specifically makes you make a test or takes your armor away, you can't be without it. It's also a way for you as a player to say, GM, put me in bad positions. Crusher's instinct in Mirror Shades was perfect. Whenever I see magic, run away. Because you get rewarded whenever your character's instinct gets you in trouble. This one, yes, whenever I'm startled, draw a weapon. That is perfect. If you're in a back alley and thieves jump out, boom, sword's in my hand. But if you're in the noble court and you see your rival across the room and your rival shows up out of nowhere and you're like, oh shit, I thought you were across the ocean, your instinct is to take out your sword, which the king would be pissed about. So you can do it anyway. You can be like, shit, I draw my sword. Then the guards will draw your sword. Now you got to explain to yourself and to everybody else in the room, like, whoa, hold on, why did I do that? Now, these have to be written in such a way that they're actionable, but not like, whenever I'm in a fight, win. Like, that is bullshit. In the same way that I'm the best ever is a shitty belief. And these, you get 3 of them, so they pair up with their beliefs. You have 3 beliefs, 3 instincts, and you have traits. And there are 3 kinds of traits: die traits, call-on traits, and character traits. Die traits give you extra dice in certain circumstances. Call-on traits get you the ability to break ties. And character traits just say something about your character. These define the specialness of your character. Character traits are about when someone looks at you or when someone gets to know you, they're going to say, oh shit, this is that guy, he is that. Like, any character in the world could be fat or hairy, but if you take the fat trait and the hairy trait, you are the fattest, you are the hairiest, right? That is a thing that gets you in situations that matter. So this is a way to say about your character, positive or negative, these are things that are relevant. Like bloodthirsty is a trait, angry is a trait, coward is a trait, crippled is a trait, one leg, one eye, photographic memory. They're all things that allow you to say things about your character, and you pay for them, even if they're quote unquote bad for your character, because you get points for them when they get you in trouble. So your character is fat and hairy, for example, and maybe in the culture you're in, that's a bad idea. That's a thing that you're in a culture of thin and hairless people. So in that circumstance, fat and hairy is going to be a problem for you. But when you go back home to your homeland, where it's a sign of wealth to be fat and have a great beard, then you use it to your advantage. The thing that people have their mind kind of blown is when you have a negative trait, you're paying for it because it's easier to get yourself in trouble. Here's an example of a character. Here's a familiar little goon that we know. Tyrion, for example, might have a belief, I am not less than any man, and I'll prove it by showing off how smart I am all the time. So every time Tyrion proves how smart he is and someone slaps him in the face or treats him like shit, he's going to get points. If he can somehow prove to someone, I am just as good as you because I am smart, then he's going to get even more points, right? Tyrion has an instinct. When there is wine, drink it. He'll never have to go without getting drunk if he wants to, right? The GM will never be able to be like, oh, there was totally wine there, but you didn't drink any, because he has an instinct. However, when he shouldn't be drinking, that's a bad time for this instinct, right? When he's like, oh, I have to go and meet the High Septon, I better get drunk first. He has the traits dwarf, Lannister, smartass, and secretly kind of a nice guy. Those are all traits that he can use to his advantage or against him, depending, right? So he could say, oh, I meet a character, and I'm gonna be like, hey, don't you know me? I'm a Lannister, and that's one of his traits working for him. And then when the character's like, oh, really? Because I'm a bannerman of the Starks, he's gonna be like, oops, shit, that's a bad deal. This is a way to, to illustrate how this character might be in Burning Wheel. Obviously, he'd have 2 more beliefs and 2 more instincts. He'd probably have a reputation. He'd probably have some affiliations. Tyrion would be a high-level character. He'd have a lot of points sunk into him. Now, circles is a special attribute that allows you to generate brand new characters based on your life path. This is how I've been porting this to other systems. This is how I think Maurice showed up in Mirror Shades. This is where Randy came from in Swan Song. Circles is a fucking awesome mechanic, and I love it, and I love putting it in every game I can. Sometimes it doesn't go so good, though. So I'm going to tell you a little story. I call this the Han and Lando story. Or, how do circles work? So, the Han and Lando story is an example of a burning wheel PC on a spaceship who's desperate for somebody to help him out. So, Han and Leia and Chewie and them, they're on the Millennium Falcon, and they're looking for somewhere to go, right? And so Han's player says to the GM, I need, like, an old smuggling buddy of mine. I need somebody who's going to help me out in this bad situation. I got to get away from the Empire. Shit's, like, getting too real. I got to get out of here. Where can I go? And the GM's like, okay, you want somebody nearby, someone who's going to help you, and someone who's also, like, kind of underhanded, like smuggler buddy. Okay, cool. So, go ahead, roll your circles. Han rolls, totally fucks it up. Just completely blows the roll. So, he says to the GM, well, do I not find anybody? GM's like, no way, man. You totally do. His name's Lando Calrissian. Right there. He's in Bespin. So Han's player says, hey, Leia? Lando. Leia's like, Lando system? She's like, no. Lando's not a system. He's a man. But because Han fucked up the roll, Lando turns out to be a very bad deal. He's still Han's friend, and Han manages to turn it around. But Lando made a bad deal. He made a deal with the Emperor, and you find somebody to help you, but it doesn't go quite the way you want. And this is, again, a perfect example of the game not saying no, right? Of saying yes, but it's going to be complicated before the day is through. You can affect your circles rolls by affiliations and reputations. So you can pay at the beginning to be like, I want to be better at finding other bandits or other smugglers. So I'm going to take a high affiliation with a smuggler's order or a reputation for the best smuggler in the system. You can have negative affiliations and reputations. So like a certain group hates you, or you have a reputation for being opposed to a certain group or a bad reputation. That's something that can happen to you. And that can happen through play. Reputations happen and affiliations happen just by playing the game. Resources is a stat that takes all of the moment-to-moment shit about money, like I have 100 gold, and I have 15 silver, and I have 10 GP gems, and just makes them a single roll. So you can say, I have resources too. I want to roll to buy a boat. Okay, cool, it's Ob 4. Well, you better get some help. So it just makes it a stat. Money is a stat in this game. And you can have cash dice if you find a treasure chest full of gold, but it's just a die you can use once to boost a resources roll. So, if you fail that roll, you become taxed. It takes money to make money, and so you can lose your resources. Your credit can run out. When you're making your character and you're building up your life paths, you get points that you use to spend to buy spells if you're a wizard. So gifted is a trait you have to be a wizard. You can buy equipment, so swords, horses, armor, food, shoes. You have to buy shoes. Shoes cost 1 point. Don't forget your shoes. And you can buy relationships. And relationships are NPCs they're like circles you rolled in your past. They can be characters that you know, characters who are your friends, characters who are your enemies, and they cost a certain amount depending on how important they are. You know, the king or the queen or the prince or the princess, they're going to be like 15 points to begin with. A lower level duke might be 10 points or less. Or somebody who's a nobody, they might just start at 5 points, right? So there's a different amount that you pay, but the idea is you can bring them down by complicating those relationships. So if you have a relationship with the king, cool. Oh, but wait, you're a bandit? That's forbidden. And he's your brother? Okay, that's less expensive. But he hates you? Uh-oh, that's more. So it gets to be less and less expensive. So you can have relationships with people who are really important, but it's going to be expensive unless you make it complicated. So to use an example that I used before, this is an inexpensive relationship, right? Artha is a word in Sanskrit that means something that I don't remember because it's not really important. They're basically character advancement points. So they're points earned by playing to your beliefs, instincts, and traits. There's 3 kinds. There's fate points, persona points, and deeds points. Fate points are okay. They don't give you a big bonus, but you get them easily, right? Pursuing a belief gets you a fate point. Resolving a belief gets you a persona point. Resolving a belief in a huge dramatic set piece moment, that gets you. So like, I'll give you an example. The king is a terrible thing to behold and should be torn from the throne. Right? He's a monster. The king is a monster. We should tear him from the throne. That's an okay belief, but what we need to do is make it so that we can earn fate and persona from it, not just a deeds point. So the king is a bad dude. I will unseat him by undermining his authority in the church. So I can, every day that we play, I can pursue that by undermining him in play, by going to the church and being like, hey, I heard the king talking shit about you, or by making up evidence, or finding evidence, or whatever, doing all of that stuff. Pursuing it will get me fate. When I turn the church against the king, I'll get persona, and when I finally unseat the king and raise to the throne myself, because that was my fucking plan all along, I get a deeds point. In exchange for these points, I can gain bonus dice, avoid being killed. All other advancements comes from making tests. It's the Skyrim method. If you played those games, you know how this works. Using your skills on screen, you get better at them. The number of dice you're rolling versus the obstacle tells you what kind of test you need. You need a certain number of tests for each thing. Once you get enough, your skill just goes up automatically. You don't need to pay for it. You don't need to train. So how do you get new traits? Let's say Tyrion doesn't want to be secretly a nice guy anymore. Let's say Tyrion wants to be outwardly a nice guy, or he wants to change his trait to total dickhead. What you can do is, in play, if you have a trait you never use, you might lose it, right? If you trait you want, play your character like you already have it. So just be a nice guy, right? And at the end of the adventure, everyone votes to grant or remove traits from the character. So if a character has bloodthirsty, for example, and you never show your bloodthirst, at the end of an adventure, everyone might be like, oh, hold on, dude, you're not bloodthirsty at all. And my favorite thing about these traits, the best part about this, is every character gets cultural traits at the beginning that are stereotypes about that culture, right? So if we were playing Burning Wheel and we were using the Swan Song characters, Prosper might have cultural traits from Cabral that's like cyborg obsessed, snooty. He might have computer nerd, right? And if you don't use those, you lose it, right? So if he's not acting snooty, he might lose that trait. However, conflicted is a trait he could get, right? Religiously conflicted in particular, right? So this is how players gain additional traits. You don't spend points on them. If you're not a sorcerer and you want to become gifted, go out into the world and find a way to change yourself into a gifted person for sorcery. So what I think is going to be really cool about playing this online, because this is all a lead up to playing this on Roll20, what I think is going to be really great is when we turn this trait vote over to the audience. We're going to let you vote for what the character's new traits are. So as a group, if you all decide that Andrew's character has megalomania, vote for it, and he'll get it. And now he has to play, if he wants rewards, he has to play his character megalomaniacally, right? Which he's probably already doing, but now he's going to get mechanically reinforced for that. So this is the audience participation of this game, right? I'm really excited about how that's going to go. I think people are going to be, I think people are going to like it. So trait votes, pretty cool thing.